Welcome to DOScember, and yes, I know I'm cutting it close. But December kind of ran away from me, and so now it is the last day of the year, and I still want to record and publish my originally planned DOScember video, and I'm hopefully getting it out on time. So let me fire up this machine and then walk you through what I want to show you. And while it's still December, let's add a little bit of festive flair in the form of cheap, crappy little USB Christmas tree. Plug this in. There we go. Much better. Now, what do I want to do today? I was going to walk you through some of the DOS shells that I was exposed to when I started getting into computers. So, what is a DOS shell? Those are typically any sort of applications that sit on top of the actual operating system to enable the interaction between you as the user and the machine. So when you tell it to list a directory, format a floppy disk, etc., those are the tools where you essentially give that command, and then the shell forwards it to the operating system, which executes it at a much lower level. Now, the command line interpreter here that does these sort of things is a shell in itself. And similar to like Unix or Unix-like and Linux things, which have command line based shells like bash, C shell, Z shell, etc., this is just essentially the command prompt, a shell, the most basic shell I would think that you can get for the operating system, and this is running DOS 6.22. Doing these command line thingies, using command lines, commands and switches, etc., to interact with the operating system is cumbersome, and let's face it, what do we use these things for? Start games, start a word processor, start an Excel spreadsheet or some spreadsheet program to do work. We don't need to like fiddle around with all of these things. So graphical user interfaces or other shells on top of the MS-DOS command line interpreter were introduced over time to try and make life easier for you. And I'm going to show you a few that I was exposed to in my youth. The first one that was kind of native to MS-DOS is the DOS shell. And I don't know, where is it? I forgot what the command, oopsie, for it was. Okay, DOS shell was the name of the command, not shell. All these things that you forget over time. So this was a very basic kind of user interface on top of MS-DOS, and is nothing more than essentially a file browser. So here you have kind of a graphical representation, of the hard drive or any sort of drives that you might have. And it's pretty rudimentary. Do I have mouse support? No, I don't, because I didn't install a mouse driver. So this is all going to be key based, but you essentially go through these things and then you can sort of expand, and look into these directories and essentially start. What do we have here? Ooh. So with tab, you have to remember all of these keys that do things. Like with tab, you move between the two windows. But yeah, so you essentially just move around, launch programs, and navigate through the hierarchy. You can format things, copy things. Let's get out of here again. Oh, yes, really quit. Press any key to return to DOS shell. And so yeah, that's a pretty basic file explorer, or file system explorer, I should say. This debuted in DOS 4 and got kicked out of the standard distribution with DOS 6, I believe. But then you could install it from the supplementary disk that came with every DOS distribution. I think you may have had to actually order it from Microsoft to get it. So let's get out of this thing. Alt file exit, Alt F4, just like Windows. Some versions of the DOS shell actually looked a little bit like some of the early Windows versions. So next one is Norton Commander. And this thing was one of the first that fascinated me because of the blue background. I just loved that blue color scheme on early EGA and later on VGA monitors. So I got kind of hooked on that, and the DOS editor, the basic editor, etc. They all used a similar color scheme, and I just loved staring at that bluish, yellow, white, etc. Colors for some of those text-based programs. Norton Commander came out first in '86, I believe, and went through several versions. Similar to the DOS shell, you could have like two columns where you had a representation of the file system and you could copy things back and forth. You could have formatting, deleting of files, launching applications, and it also, with later versions, had some built-in file viewers, so you could potentially open and render maybe a bitmap or a GIF graphics file right here. Do I have mouse support in here? No, I don't have it either. But it's essentially very similar to DOS shell, although it's much more advanced. You have a little DOS prompt down here, so you can execute commands, and then it goes back into the graphical representation. You can turn one of these columns on and off, so you have an extended kind of command oopsie thingy here. Yeah, I didn't really use this thing for too long, since pretty much at the same time other graphical user interfaces came out, and so this was very short-lived for me. This was often cloned in terms of structure and look and feel, but yeah, that was one that I used right off the bat when I started having and working with a computer. F10. Let's just quit, and then we'll move on to the next one. So next is a little bit of an interesting system, and that would be the GEM desktop, which I believe stands for Graphical Environment Manager or something like that. And that was provided by, Digital Research, the ones that also did DR-DOS. So you may be familiar with this kind of interface. This is a nice resolution, actually, from the Atari. And indeed, this ran side by side the development of the this as a DOS shell and the Atari operating system, or rather graphical user interface on the Ataris. I got introduced to this on my first computer, which was an Amstrad PC, and Amstrad struck a deal with Digital Research to provide their DOS operating system side by side with MS-DOS, but also GEM. And I think the mouse in here works, yes. So you have kind of these two windows. You can access floppy drives, you can launch apps, and I have installed a few here, like for instance there's the Draw app. Let's see if there's anything interesting in here that we could... No, nothing in pictures. But it is a pretty neat system that was snappy, easy, and, well, provided a good abstraction on top of the command line interface that was easy to use. And I used this for as long as we used that Amstrad PC, and then moved on to a 386 later on. So, yeah, GEM. Let's move on to the last one that I want to show you, and that is, of course, Microsoft Windows. and we have here version 3.1 installed. The first version, I think, came out in, was it 85, and wasn't really much more to look at than, let's say, maybe the DOS shell. To be honest, they were very similar in the look and feel. This is version 3.1. Version 3 is kind of where it became interesting, and this typical user interface with the close menu here and the minimize and maximize buttons over here started to appear, and that was kind of in the 90s, I believe, with version 3.0. And was probably cementing Microsoft's status as the provider of operating systems and shells or graphical user interfaces like this, which then evolved into a fully standalone Windows later on after ME. And it's mostly application based, so whatever you want is in these application groups like games, or in here the main group, and you have to actually use a specific application if you wanted to go down to the file system level and explore folders, files. This also has execution built right in, so you can just double click an executable and it will run it, DOS and or Windows. It has file viewers built in if you had the support enabled for these things, and you can toggle between floppy drives and the hard drive here. You can format things. But yeah, that is a dedicated application, whereas in previous versions it all started from a file manager like kind of representation here. So that is Windows. And that already concludes my tour through DOS shells. I hope that was somewhat interesting. If you so inclined, feel free to like the video, subscribe to my channel. Other than that, I wish you a happy new year, all the best for 2026, and look forward to more exciting than this videos coming in the new year. So thank you for watching.